Two people are waiting.
Right. Hi, I'm Heather McCain from Live, Educate, Transform Society. We are a nonprofit that is entirely staffed by disabled and neurodivergent folks, and most of us are also 2S LGBTQIA+. I am a white non-binary person who has a shaved head, blue glasses, and freckles. And this slide has our logo, which is a light bulb made of speech bubbles. Some of our members think it looks like a hot air balloon, and we're good with that as well. I do these visual descriptions to ensure that blind and partially sighted participants have access to visual information, and describing the images that are on the slide. So thank you for joining us today. In this workshop, we have autonomy over our bodies, brains, and senses. I trust that you will do what you need for yourself, whether that be fidgeting, walking, lying down, taking breaks, or doodling. I value your participation, however that looks. And this slide has an image of a person's hands cupping a rainbow heart. This slide has a photograph of sunlight filtering through trees at Seymour Provincial Park. I'm coming to you today from the stolen land of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And this acknowledgement is a tiny piece in the larger context of the ongoing work that must be done in order to challenge the legacies of colonialism and create true disruptive change. We live in a society created with colonial power and rules. Our thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes are influenced by colonial stereotypes, including a mentality of us versus them. Originating with papal bulls or formal statements from the Pope in the 1400s, the doctrine of discovery is a set of legal and religious principles that justified the colonization of indigenous lands. The doctrine of discovery stated that Christian European nations could claim land if it was uninhabited. It dehumanized indigenous people and set up legal and moral frameworks to consider populated indigenous lands as terra nullius, meaning nobody's land. Thus, their land could be quote unquote discovered by Christian Europeans. The doctrine also stated that indigenous people were not entitled to the same rights as Europeans. We continue to support and perpetuate colonialism by a lack of education and inadequate education about our historical and present colonization and how it creates oppression and disadvantages that continue to affect indigenous communities, families, and individuals. Colonization and its effects can contribute to the feeling of being an imposter. Tanya Talaga is a storyteller, journalist, and author and member of the Fort Williams First Nations. Tanya is the first Anishinaabe woman to deliver a CBC Massey Lectures. Tanya states, for many Indigenous people, the feeling of not belonging or being an imposter is deeply rooted in the historical and ongoing impacts of colonialization. It's a struggle to reclaim our identities and assert our worth in spaces that have long excluded us. Tanya is the author of 3 books, 7 Fallen Feathers, which I highly recommend, All Our Relations, and The Knowing, which I haven't yet had the chance to read. So what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is feeling inadequate, like you aren't qualified to do the work that you're doing, or that you might be discovered as a fraud. A person with imposter syndrome experiences self-doubt and often attributes their success to luck or people overestimating their abilities. People with imposter syndrome also tend to downplay, discount, or minimize their abilities and achievements. The term was originally coined by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Enos in their study of professional women in a clinical setting. Imposter syndrome is widespread. It is something that many of us feel whether we are a student, new to our field, or highly accomplished person. There are ways to reduce the feelings of imposter syndrome and address the voices in our heads that tell us we have to doubt ourselves and our work. Imposter syndrome comes from internalized messages that we don't always realize that we're taking in. It can also stem from being a person with multiple intersecting identities, particularly identities from equity denied communities. Imposter syndrome itself shows itself in a variety of ways, depending on a person's personality, background, and circumstances. There are ways to reduce the feelings of imposter syndrome and address the voices in our heads that tell us to doubt ourselves and our work. A study published in the International Journal of Behavioral Sciences suggests that more than 70% of people are likely to encounter imposterism at some point in their life. And this includes people from populations pushed to the margins, students, women, successful people, experts, adults who were high achievers as children, and people who are the only representative of a demographic. This includes being the only disabled person, the only Black person, the only queer person, the only immigrant, the only person who's been incarcerated, and other types of demographics. Author Reina Gattuso says, let's get one thing straight. Imposter syndrome isn't just a personal problem. It's a historic result of who gets to be in power and define success, based on categories like gender, race, sexuality, and ability. Some of the signs of imposter syndrome include over-preparation, procrastination because of fear, not believing it when people compliment you, thinking that things have only worked out in your favor because of luck and not skill, expecting perfectionism from yourself and others, having unrealistic expectations and being disappointed when you don't meet them, focusing on errors over success, and also focusing on what you need to do better next time rather than on the success you achieved this time. It can also include being worried that people will find you out, discover that you are a fraud, that you don't know what you're doing, feel like you're the only person who's not sure what you're supposed to be doing, being anxious and having self-doubt, remembering that one piece of negative feedback, but ignoring the majority of positive feedback that you've received, setting unrealistic expectations, and then chastising yourself when you don't meet them, and not allowing yourself to be human. So based on research by Dr. Valerie Young, an expert in imposter syndrome and co-founder of the Imposter Syndrome Institute, imposter syndrome can be broken down into 5 basic types. And I'd like you to think about which of these types you might fit in. So there's the perfectionist. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that unless you are absolutely perfect, you could have done better. And this slide has an image of a person with 4 arms and holding 4 arrows, all in a bullseye. You feel like an imposter because your perfectionistic traits make you believe you're not as good as others might think you are. You might say, I should deliver a perfect performance 100% of the time. My work must always be A+. Then there's the expert. The expert feels like an imposter because they don't know everything there is to know about a particular subject or topic, or they haven't mastered every step of the process. Because there is more for them to learn, they don't feel as if they have reached the rank of expert. And this slide shows an image of a person who's reading a book, and behind them, their wall is entirely blocked by piles of books. This person might think, if I were really smart, I would already know everything I need to know about this. The soloist. It's also possible to feel like an imposter if you have had to ask for help to reach a certain level of status. Since you couldn't get there on your own, you question your competence or abilities. And this slide has an illustration of a person holding a baby, but they also have multiple other arms that are working, including vacuuming, hanging up clothes, cooking, sewing, dusting, and doing computer work. Oh, and the soloist might think, I believe that true competence is equal to my own unassisted achievements. I must do everything myself. The super person. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that you must be the hardest worker or reach the highest level of achievement possible. And if you don't, you are a fraud. And this slide has an image of the chest of Superman and the Superman logo. So a thought from the super person might be, if I were really competent, I would be able to do it all and do it easily and well. The natural genius or the great mind. In this imposter syndrome type, you may feel like a fraud simply because you don't believe that you are naturally intelligent or competent. And this slide has an image of a person holding up a frame that has a light bulb in the middle, and behind them is a wall that has graphics and words like idea, solution, money, brain. If you don't get something right the first time around, or it takes you longer to master a skill, you feel like an imposter. They might say something like, I judge myself on ease and speed. If I were really competent, it would come easily and perfectly. So what type of imposter syndrome do you have? If you'd like to share, you can add to the chat or unmute yourself. So I can talk a bit about myself, which is that I used to be perfectionist, but I have worked very hard to let go of those tendencies. I remain, however, the soloist. A friend once explained to me that being a soloist can sometimes be a trauma response, which is certainly true for me. I am working to lessen its hold on me, but I have not yet unlearned it. The next two slides have thought bubbles with text describing what imposter syndrome sounds like in our minds. So some of these thoughts are like, I won't be able to live up to expectations. I am an utter failure. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. I need to know everything. I am inadequate. My success is because of luck, not skill. Everyone else has their shit together. They're going to figure out I don't know what I'm doing, and I need to know everything. So take a moment, and what does imposter syndrome sound like to you? I like this quote by Jonathan Pulliam. The second, imposter syndrome will have you questioning your place in the spaces that you prayed about being in. It's a lie. You're capable. You're allowed to learn. You belong. So we're going to talk a bit about how being from a population pushed to the margin affects imposter syndrome. Kelly Yakubu wrote in a blog post for Hack Library School that nearly everyone in grad school has dealt with or is currently dealing with imposter syndrome. Those who claim to have never suffered from it are either lying or actually are the imposters. Mental health issues can lead to extreme imposter syndrome, especially for people of color. We see the signs that tell us we don't belong in this field. All white management and staff, lack of representation in collections, etc. For many of us, we feel we have to work twice as hard as white people to be at the same level. But even with numerous accomplishments, publications, and experience, we might still feel like we're not good enough. Sonia Sotomayor, the first Hispanic Supreme Court justice, has admitted to feeling like a fraud and not fitting in throughout her life. Growing up in the Bronx in a modest home with her single mother and brother, Sotomayor never thought of herself as a likely candidate for Princeton University. As she once said in a speech, I have spent my years since Princeton, while at law school and in my various professional jobs, not feeling completely a part of the world I inhabit. I am always looking over my shoulder, wondering if I measure up. A quote I liked but couldn't find the author of is the academic and professional world, with all of its bias systems, codes, and networks, will make you feel like you don't belong. It will whisper to you, you're not good enough for this place. It will scream words you don't know to make you feel small. Do not listen. You are more than worthy and profoundly capable. Your language, upbringing, and experiences are not hindrances, they are your strengths. Hold your head high and claim your space. My own story started at 17, the summer after graduation, when my world was flipped upside down by my body self-destructing and my life with chronic pain and disability beginning. I spent 5 years not really leaving my house unless for medical appointments, desperately trying to get a diagnosis. By the age of 23, I was using a power wheelchair and I experienced discrimination and access issues from bus drivers who would lie and say the ramps weren't working because they just didn't want to bother loading and unloading someone in a wheelchair. This slide has a photo of me in a wheelchair next to a bus. I wrote letter after letter to TransLink with no response. I was told to get an organization to support me, but I couldn't find any interested. And someone laughingly suggested that I start my own organization. So in 2005, I founded my organization. I wrote the same letter to TransLink, but this time with executive director under my name, and I got a response a week later. When I started, I sat in on a lot of meetings where I was the only person under 40, the only person without a degree, the only queer person, the only neurodivergent person, the only person living in poverty, the only disabled person, and often the only male. I most definitely experienced imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and questions of whether I had a right to be heard or even be at the table. But then someone would say something not reflective of life with a disability, and I would jump in. Still, it took a long time to feel as if I had a place there. And this slide has an image of a board meeting, and somebody is drawing on the whiteboard on the front of the room. I caused a lot of my own spirals of self-doubt as I decided early on that the best way to learn was to say yes to any project that was of interest to me. And this slide has a cartoon-like illustration of the word yes with a speech bubble behind it. No matter if I thought I could do it, I would say yes. I created a very steep learning curve for myself, and I had a lot of stress inducing loops of self-doubt and what the hell have I done to myself moments. I routinely questioned my ability to do the projects, or more importantly, to do them to my high standards. I grew my organization from a one-issue organization in two small communities to an organization with projects across the province, and thanks to digital accessibility of the pandemic, having worldwide audiences. I still continue to say that today Heather has way too much confidence in tomorrow Heather, because I do continue to say yes and create these loops of stress of, can I do this? A large part of my success was really realizing that there is no way to completely eliminate or overcome self-doubt, that it is a natural part of life, but that there are ways to reframe how I think so I don't face as much self-doubt, or so that I learn to push through it quicker. My speech is closely connected to how I think, and I have worked hard to make sure that my speech reflects the confidence I have developed over the years. Part of this was definitely coming into myself as an advocate and achieving successes, but also making sure I did my best to never minimize myself or my work with what I said or how I said it. I spent over a decade working on changing the narrative within my own head, reframing failures as learning and growth opportunities. I created a support system who uplift and encourage me, celebrate with me, listen when I need to vent, and lessen the blows when I am being too hard on myself. I began to keep track of compliments and achievements so that they would be easier to refer to in those moments when I wasn't feeling it. And I worked hard to unlearn the expectation of perfectionism. And this slide has an image of 4 different hands that are creating a heart around a pink heart. However, I want to note that while I did a lot of work on my own perceptions and thinking and built a great community of support, I still had to deal with being tokenized and frustrated by systems built on oppression and colonial ideals. I was talked over by people who called themselves allies and didn't see the irony of speaking over a person from the very community they said they were trying to uplift. I've had to fight my way into spaces that were not made with disabled, queer, neurodivergent people in mind. I've dealt with people who were annoyed that I managed to make my way in. I've had to interact with biased and prejudiced people who committed microaggressions and larger oppressions. I had to deal with people who devalued my expertise because it was based on lived experience and community-based knowledge. I had to ignore those who felt disabled people should be grateful just for being included, people who felt my being there was already more than they wanted to give, people who were shocked and dismayed by my expectation of full and active participation and of my wanting to make my spaces even more accessible to increase the participation of disabled people. I also had to wrestle with how to get people to use my appropriate pronouns and respect my intersecting identities. I've had to deal with people whose bare minimum effort was tolerating me and or my identities. And this slide has an image of a person who's holding cue cards that read they and them. I was brought onto boards for my lived experience and to speak for the disability community, then completely shut down when what I said was not what the organizations wanted to hear. I started on one board when I was using my power wheelchair full time. After several years of hard work and out of necessity because of spinal arthritis and sidewalks not being smooth, I transitioned to using a walker. And this slide has an image of me with my walker. One day and after I transitioned to using a walker, there were some days where if I was dropped off at the front door, I could walk in without a walker. One day I overheard several members of the board talking, and they said because either I didn't come in with my walker or my walker was often outside of the frame of photos, I no longer had any purpose or use to the board as they didn't get credit for having a disabled person. And I realized how superficial my value was to them. I could fill an entire presentation with the ways that the system still worked against me, but I did what I could to work on myself and to support others in addressing their imposter syndrome. I also worked to create environments that lessen the impact of imposter syndrome, that are built with all people in mind, where people can be their full selves, strong, voices heard, strengths recognized, and celebrated. The path to liberation includes tearing down the walls of oppression brick by brick, and while I acknowledge it's a monster of a wall, I think doing what we can to address imposter syndrome and take the space we deserve is one way we can start to take those bricks down. And the slide has an image of a wrecking ball going through a wall of bricks. My organization did a year-long board project where we were aiming to create a database of diverse qualified board candidates and match them with boards. We were tired of organizations saying they represented certain populations, but having no one from those populations in positions of power. We started by interviewing people with decades of board experience, those new to boards, those contemplating being on boards, and those who didn't consider themselves board material. By the end of the year, we realized we didn't want to participate in placing candidates from populations from equity denied communities onto boards because until the environment of the boards changed, retention would not happen and tokenism would continue. Instead, our organization focused on switching our attention to education. One thing we heard over and over by qualified candidates was that they would feel like an imposter in board settings. We teach 2S LGBTQIA+ history, breaking barriers, crip kindness, disability awareness, environmental justice, and many other types of workshops now. And this slide has an image of a group of people sitting at a table, and above them are colorful speech bubbles. So a healthy amount of self-doubt is a useful tool. In order to grow, develop, and reach our goals, we must question, deliberate, and confront ourselves. However, all too often, what starts with one self-criticism can rush like a snowball, creating an avalanche that emotionally destroys us as we spiral down to the bottom. What begins as an exploration of a current problem leads to thoughts about that one time in 5th grade when we stood up in front of the class and got the question wrong. We take a current situation and pile on past mistakes we've made and keep track of. This is not healthy or productive. It is hard to stay motivated while under the weight of a pile of self-doubt. It intensifies feelings of not belonging, being in over your head, feelings of failure, and it multiplies at a rate that is hard to call a halt to. It is extremely difficult to stop or slow a spiral before it cascades beyond our control, but the following tools with practice may help keep your self-doubt from turning from healthy, reflective self-examination to being buried alive by doubt, fear, panic, and insecurity. This slide has a photograph of stepping stones in a stream. So much of our self-doubt comes from the stories we tell ourselves. We are the ones who have control over what scrolls through our head, even though it often feels as if we are powerless to stop it. Flip the script. Reframe what failure means to you. Look at it as opportunity, chances for growth, reevaluation, and improvement. See each situation as a stepping stone towards your larger goal. All too often, when self-doubt spiral takes hold, instead of focusing on how we are constantly learning, adapting, and moving forward, we remind ourselves of our failings, negative emotions, and memories we prefer to forget. We weigh ourselves down and then get surprised by how exhausted we are. We should be reminding ourselves that learning and successes have emerged out of past failures. So examples of how you can use this is to create a list, and on one side, put down your mistakes, failures, missed opportunities, and or situations, something that you perceive as negative. And on the other side, list lessons, successes, attributes, or opportunities that have been the direct result of those so-called failures. I live with disability and chronic pain. This is perceived as a negative and something that changes the landscape of my life and is outside of my control, but I have learned so much from it, grown as a person, learned the importance of adaptation, and found a real purpose in life. When I couldn't find that organization to support me contacting TransLink, I thought I had failed, that I didn't know how to be disabled or have the skills to find what was available to support people with disabilities. But then I started my own nonprofit and changed not only my life, but the lives and communities of many others. What are situations that you've experienced which seem dire or like failures at the time, but taught you necessary lessons that made you grow later on? I was talking to a fellow who has dinner with his 2 kids every night, and instead of asking them what they did at school that day, he asks them, what mistakes did you make today? And what did you learn from that? He wants them to realize from a young age that success only comes from trial and error, from building upon past mistakes and using those experiences as stepping stones to achieve their goals, to get to where you want to be. There needs to be more conversations publicly in schools with ourselves about how failure is an innate part of success. I have never met a successful person who hasn't fallen on their face, tripped over a finish line, messed up, made an error, or had to come and learn from an outcome different from the original goal. I love to read autobiographies. The books I enjoy the most are the stories that don't gloss over the failed auditions, the lost business opportunities, the screwed up relationships, or the side hustles that burnt out. And this slide has an image of two school-age children who are both very frustrated at their school desks. Another thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to believe everything you think, and this was a big lesson for myself. This slide has 3 photographs of people holding their head and looking serious. I truly wish we taught children this from a young age, that you don't have to believe everything you think. You may hear a voice in your head, but you do not have to add value to what that voice is saying. You do not have to believe it, give weight to it, or repeat it. We can question where the thoughts are coming from. Are they from people in the past or people in the present who we don't have a good relationship with? Are they from past trauma? Are they insecurities that we have never heard anyone else to say to us, but we repeat on loop in our mind? We have the power to ask, do I believe this? And if we don't, try to find ways to stop it before it spirals. Look for triggers. Does doing a specific task lead to a certain thought? If so, is there a lesson to be learned? Do we need to get help with that task or do more research or take a class? Take the comments apart. Don't assume that what scrolls through your mind is completely directly from you. There are many influences at play, including our own ability to question our thoughts' validity. This photograph shows a person high-fiving their cat. Make sure to motivate yourself, treat yourself, give yourself credit when you succeed, not only when you reach those big goals, but when you meet the nesting goals that are the stepping stones that lead to the mountaintop success. Having direct memories of when you treated yourself is easier to access in the spiral than trying to talk yourself out of the spiral. I like this tweet by Dangerous Woman. Whatever you think you can't do, just know that there is someone who is confidently doing it wrong right now. They have no plans at doing it better either, and people are paying them to do it. Please believe in your own experience as much as they believe in their mediocrity. This slide has 3 photographs, one of a person looking after a child, the next of a child and an adult planting a tree, and the third of a person helping another person at a computer. Helping someone else reminds us of what we have to offer, whether through lived experience, our skills, attributes, or work life. Looking outside of ourselves for a bit can help stop the cycle of self-doubt talk in our head, particularly when we acknowledge how we are helping or what we are achieving by helping others. If someone says thank you, reflect on what you did that was worthy of thanks. Keep a list and look at that list when you begin to doubt what you have to offer. This slide has 2 photographs. The first shows a person sitting on a bed, comforting a person sitting on the floor next to them. And the second shows 2 friends talking outside on a bench. It is okay to vent about something that is frustrating. Knowing who to vent to is what's important. Vent to a parent, a partner, a friend, a coworker. Make sure it's someone who's reliably supportive and understanding. And once you've vented, move on as best as you can. If you don't feel that you have someone available who you can vent to, write it out or talk it into your devices. Sometimes we just need a change of scenery. We can't always get into the mountains or to a beach, but we can go for a walk around the block or to the roof of our work building or even down the street to the store to get a treat. Move your body and get some air and try again later. And this slide has 4 photographs that I took. The first is of an open road. The second is of eagles. The third is a very close-up photo of a bee with pollen on its head. And the fourth is of a surfer looking out at the ocean in Tofino. Look to animals. Sometimes we aren't getting what we need from people, and so sometimes it's good to look to animals. If you have a cat or a dog or a hamster, talk to them and let them know you're feeling, if you don't have access to an animal within your house, volunteer at like SPCA or go to a cat cafe, visit a friend who has an animal, offer to dog sit. Animals offer a type of compassion and non-judgmental listening that people don't experience from people. And so sometimes if you are hearing too many voices from people that are negative, it's nice to go to the soft, comforting warmth of an animal. And this slide has 3 images, one of a person kissing their cat, one of a person and their horse, and another of a person napping with their dog. Sorry, I'm just similar to volunteering or offering your expertise. Offering support is another way that you can show yourself what you have to offer, as well as reminding yourself that you are not the only person who is struggling. Everybody needs help from other people. And so it's great to be able to offer support to family, friends, community, whether this is through volunteering or just sitting with a friend. One way to offer support is if you see someone, for example, sitting on a bench in public, crying, going up to them and just sitting with them, asking if they want to talk. This can often help shift us out of our own minds and make us realize that our own problems are things that if we talked about, we would be able to find ways to break them down and hopefully either work towards a solution or find ways to be supported as we go through our frustrations. And this slide has 2 images of friends. One is giving flowers to another, and the other is 2 people sitting side by side. Role play. So pretend you are a friend, talk in their voice, and then in your friend's voice. What would they say to you? Or imagine that your friend is in your current situation. What would you say to them? We are often kinder to those we love than to ourselves. If you can't find a voice with self-love in your own head, use a friend's voice or talk to yourself how you would talk to them. And this slide has an image of a person who's holding a speech bubble above their head. Make a perseverance list. So there are times when self-doubt crowds out any other thoughts. Make lists to use in these circumstances. Create a list of successes you've had or attributes that you're proud of, that you've come from growth that you've experienced, hard won by perseverance. Keep this list to remind you that we are all growing, learning, using past experiences, good and bad, as building blocks. This slide has a photo of a person writing a list. Stephanie Yeboah, author of Fattily Ever After, A Fat Black Girl's Guide to Living Life Unapologetically, said a tool that she uses for dealing with her inner critic is that anytime I get a lovely comment on my social media channels or my blog, I store it away by putting it in a file on my laptop, so that anytime imposter syndrome starts to creep in and I feel like a fraud, I just go into that folder and read all the lovely comments that people have said about me. This slide has an image of a car's gear shift. If you don't think that you can get out of your spiral by refocusing or trying to move forward, don't. Take a break, shift gears, go hit a ball, read a book, sit in the sun, blast music, have a mini solo dancing party, cuddle with your pet, do anything that distracts you and can help stop that spiral. Sometimes we need to release all the pent-up frustration and the swirling of self-doubt with writing. The image here has, this slide has an image of someone burning paper on a sandy beach. So an example is to write it out or type it out or record yourself talking for a couple of minutes, then set it on fire or hear the satisfying plunk of putting the file into the trash can or erasing it. Don't read it or listen to it. Don't give it any other time. Just release it and move forward. Even if it is just for an hour, turn off all devices and do something that doesn't require electronic connection. So many of us rely on our mental health being fed by nature, by being outside, breathing in fresh air. Electronics often disconnects us from that. And so it's important to have breaks from technology and go look out your window, stand on a balcony, breathe in the air, or just lay down and appreciate the space that you have. And this slide shows an empty office desk. So before meetings, I would get anxious over whether I deserved a spot at the table. So I reframed it as, what is this feedback this loop is telling me? I realized that I needed to do something to improve my confidence prior to meetings. So after each meeting, I would make a list of contributions I had made in that meeting. And then next time a meeting would roll around, I would read that list of contributions beforehand to remind myself that not only did I have a place at the table, but I had valuable contributions that would have been absent had I decided not to participate or speak up. Are there actions you can do for yourself based on some of your looping thoughts that would turn feedback into constructive ways to stop those recurring thoughts? And this slide shows a bulletin board with a post-it note. No, it doesn't. It shows an envelope with some grass beside it. Another thing that works for some people is to write affirmations like those on the slide. You are good enough. You deserve to be here. You have a voice worth hearing. I learn from every experience. I am skilled and knowledgeable. Some people say these to themselves every morning. Others have tapes that they listen to. Well, not tapes, that aged me. They have devices that they listen to these on. And I know some of our members also write them on the bathroom mirror so that the first thing they see when they get up are their affirmations. You don't need to know how to meditate. You can simply focus on your breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Keep your breathing unhurried and natural and feel your body relax. This slide has 3 photographs of people breathing, one in nature, one outside an office, and one sitting on a basketball court. You can use these tools in order to change thought patterns. So at the beginning of the presentation, we had some thought bubbles with the way that imposter syndrome sounds in our head. We can change these to work on believing I don't have to be excellent at everything. I've worked hard to be here. I deserve to be in this space. Everyone makes mistakes. Constructive feedback is a tool for growth. My success is earned, and I am enough. I can offer myself the same compassion I offer others. I will accept compliments. My success is earned. My achievements aren't flukes. I am here because I deserve to be here, and I will believe the positive things people say about me. What are other things that you could tell yourself? Some of the things that you could try are believing the good others have to say, recognizing the skill that you bring to your work or volunteering or home life. Stop expecting perfectionism from yourself. Set more realistic expectations. Find ways to focus on your success instead of errors. Understand that you do not, you are not alone in feeling like you don't know what you're doing. Also allow that it is okay to not know what you're doing, that you can learn as you go. Allow yourself to be human and make mistakes. Accept that you are responsible for your successes. Write down key achievements or compliments and take control of your thinking. So remember, what works for you might not work for someone else. What works for someone else might not work for you. So thank you for being here with me today. I'm going to open it up if there's any comments or questions. And on this slide is Let's logo. And we ask people to think about making Let's pledges at our workshops. So what is something that you have learned during the workshop that you can apply to your own life? So examples would be, let's celebrate our achievements, no matter how small. Let's try to reframe our thoughts. Let's write down any accomplishments or contributions we've made. And these are examples of Let's pledges. So think about what is a Let's pledge that you could make for yourself to work on moving forward to help kind of break apart any imposter syndrome you may be experiencing. Any questions or comments? All right. Well, I know there's some people on the live stream as well as Lori. So thank you very much for being with us here today. Oh, I see there's a chat. Lori's put thank you in the chat. You're welcome. I appreciate you being here today and watching it. If you have any questions, please do follow up. I think we've got our contact. No. But our website is connectwithlets.org. You can also find us on social media at Connect with Let's on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm Heather, so I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to reach out. So thank you.